least you can hear me, but yeah. I just talk a little hollow.
for missing school since lawmakers reformed the system in 2015. A KXAN investigation found cases are escalating every year, with more than 12,000 this year. This week on Inside the Investigations, we explain no state agency is tracking outcomes and whether the students are being helped or harmed.
Hello everyone, welcome back to KXAN. I'm Esmeralda Zamora, and today we have our Inside the Investigation segment with investigative reporter Kelly Wiley. Kelly, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here.
I'm doing great too. Today we're doing stuff a little different. Truancy within schools. Talk to us a little bit about why you decided to cover this story.
Well, I am the investigative reporter who focuses on education. We all kind of have our beats, and that's mine. And I usually do this alongside my colleague, Nabil Rabadna, and I'm sure he would say the same, but I would go to all of these hearings and do all of these stories, and in these hearings, truancy would always come up some way or another. And for those who are unfamiliar with what truancy is, it's essentially a student missing too many days of school or missing too many classes. And in Texas in particular, it's missing 10 days of school or more within, I think, like a 6-month period. And so when we were talking about funding, it would come up. When we were talking about any kind of school violence, truancy would come up. And then finally, I saw a complaint that was sent to TEA where it was alleged that a school district was sending kids to court over truancy without doing some of the other preventative measures, particularly around special education students. And so once I saw that complaint, I thought, okay, I want to dig in more here and see what's there.
And to start off, how did you begin to dig into this particular subject?
Well, I love data and I love public records, which all of us up there in the Investigate's office and really our entire station is like that. And I think it lays a great groundwork to figure out how big or small a problem is. And so the first thing that I wanted to know was how often are school districts sending kids to court over truant conduct? Just first to give you some background, there's 2 different ways that a person can make it to truancy court. One, school districts can send students, and when they send students to truancy court, it's called truant conduct. And in 2015, the law changed on this. Lawmakers essentially decriminalized truancy for students in particular. So before 2015, if a district referred a kid to truancy court, it was a Class C misdemeanor. So it was a crime. But now it is a civil case. So these cases make it to municipal judges, justices of the peace, and the students are really facing remedial orders, but not necessarily a criminal offense. For parents, it remains a Class C misdemeanor. So if a parent is referred to court over contributing to non-attendance of their student or student in their care, that is still a criminal offense. And I put in a request to the Office of Court Administration that tracks a lot of court data for the state. And what the data showed was after 2015, the number of students being referred for truant conduct really dropped. So school districts were referring a lot of students, tens of thousands every year, to court for truant conduct before 2015. And when the law changed, that dropped significantly. But what we found is leading all the way up into the pandemic, that number was etching up year over year by thousands. So 2019 was actually the peak number of student cases being referred to the courts. But then the pandemic changed a lot of things. Those numbers went down significantly. But once schools started to regulate, again, the data showed that number was ticking back in 2019 when they were at their highest for truant conduct cases against students. And really what we found is if you look at the number of cases that were sent to the courts for parents and students, it's already surpassed what it was at its highest after 2015.
Wow. And why do you think that is exactly?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway from our investigation is that there really is no data-driven way to know why that is. There are a lot of strong guesses. We had some folks tell us that, coming out of the pandemic, students just, were having trouble with attendance. Their attendance rate never came back up. There's chronic absenteeism. We had other folks tell us that, a lot of this can be dependent on the district's policies and attitudes towards truancy. They may just be being harder on it in any given year. And it can also be dependent on whether or not they found a judge that likes taking on these cases and wants to make orders or remedial orders on these cases. But again, there is no data-driven way to know. Our biggest takeaway from the investigation was that the state is tracking really nothing after a case has been referred to the courts. They're not tracking the types of orders that judges are issuing. They're not tracking the outcomes or whether it was effective. So did it lead to the student dropping out? Did the student withdraw just even when the school said they were going to send them to truancy court? The state is tracking none of that, not on a statewide level.
And Kelly, how is it possible that the state does not know exactly what is happening in these truancy courts?
The most straightforward answer is that TEA, for instance, the Texas Education Agency, that's who I think of when I think who's tracking what's happening in public schools, but they don't have the statutory authority, meaning lawmakers have not given them the authority to be able to require school districts or require courts report this information to them. So lawmakers would have to, pass a law essentially saying that justices of the peace and municipal courts have to, for instance, tell them what types of orders they're issuing, tell them how often they successfully closed a case. But in Texas right now, it's not required that courts do that. It's not required that school districts even report how many students they're referring. And so that's kind of the most straightforward answer as to why it's not happening.
And what kind of orders can they issue exactly?
It can really run the gamut. And I mean, my colleague David Barrera, who's my reporting project on this partner, and myself, we both sat in on truancy court in Travis County and also in Marble Falls. The cameras are not allowed in these proceedings, so we were just in there sort of taking notes and talking to the judges when an opportunity presented itself. And we talked to, of course, a lot of parents and students. I had, made an all call out to the few attorneys who take these cases on, and also just on social media to see, like, have you ever had an experience in these courts? And that was really where we were able to draw from what kind of orders are being issued in these courts. But one type of order that a judge can issue is for a student to get their GED, which would require them to withdraw from school. They can also require proof of homeschool. So if the kid isn't showing up to school and there's an issue with truancy, they can say, parent, if you're homeschooling them, show us proof that you're doing that. They can order them to do a third-party program, like Jail to Jobs, or different creative programs that can address, I think, like behavioral issues or challenges that a student might be having in school. They can also be something as sort of benign as ordering them to work with a mentor, to get them back in a regular habit of going to school. But again, these are all very anecdotal. We would talk to parents who would send us a copy of the orders, and we would get an idea there of like kind of the different things that a judge can issue. We would sit in court and listen, and we would kind of get an idea of what judges can issue. And then we also made records requests to municipal judges and JPs in our area in Central Texas to get an idea of what they were issuing.
And what did those records show?
Well, it was spotty and it was inconsistent at the data that we got back. We had sent out records requests to courts in our area. We'd sent records requests to school districts in our area, and we'd also sent them to county attorneys' offices, which often are kind of this in-between between the districts referring and the courts taking the case. And we had some courts who gave us some data back. They told us how many GED orders they were issuing, or how often they had to suspend a driver's license of a student, how often they were issuing fines. We had some courts who denied the records request. We would, like I said, we would send a records request to school districts asking them Tell us the total number of students that you've referred to court, broken down by year, and also broken down by demographics like age, race, disability status, if the kid was pregnant or if the child was. And some school districts were able to give us that data. Some school districts were not even able to tell us. They were able to tell us how many complaints they filed against parents and students, that total number. But the way they've been tracking the data, they were actually not able to tell us how many of those were students and how many of those were parents. So again, there wasn't one way that the data was being kept by school districts, and not all of them were willing to give us the records, courts and school districts.
And you went ahead and wrote an article on this on our website. It's on the homepage. Anyone can find it through KXAN.com's homepage. But tell us, what did you uncover and have in this article that we didn't get to talk about today?
Well, I think my colleague David and I told you we sat in on these court hearings, and there's a section in this article called KXAN in Court where he's describing what he saw in the hearings, and I think it really drives home. I think when you think about a kid or truancy or not coming to school, I think a lot of us have an idea that this is maybe someone who's getting into some things they shouldn't be doing, and maybe they're skipping. And I think the biggest takeaway that he and I had from sitting in court, and then also just from talking to families that have been impacted, is there are a lot of reasons why a kid may not be going to school. And that, I think, was the shared view of almost everyone that we talked to. The school districts, we talked to Georgetown ISD, the parents, the judges. They talked about the role mental health can play and why a kid may not be coming to school. Chronic health issues. We talked to one family where their student was having chronic migraines, which was they would have to check them out of school early or they wouldn't be able to go. And it wasn't something where they needed a doctor's, like they weren't going to the doctor every time, but because they didn't have a doctor's note, that was leading to some unexcused absences. There were issues where perhaps their disability was impacting their ability to come to school. And that's, I think, the biggest takeaway, that this is just such a nuanced issue, and it's not necessarily a kid just not wanting to go, that there are some very serious root causes to this. And the question is, without data and without knowing how these court cases are ending up for kids and for parents, it's hard to know if the current system is effective. And it's hard to know if this is the appropriate venue for every kid who may be struggling with truancy.
Yeah, Kelly, like you mentioned, there's so many reasons that these kids may not be going to school, and it's important to look into that before we do anything like this towards them, right? Yeah,
and I think the one steady line in all the reporting is that all of these folks, the judges that we talked to, the district leaders we talked to, the advocates, the families, they all want to figure it out and work in the best interests of these students. And it'll be interesting to see. We talked to Senator Royce West, who actually was one of the authors of the bill in 2015 that decriminalized truancy. We talked to him about this, and what he said to us is that we really don't know the extent of the issue because of the lack of data. And so I hope you guys will read through the article and, read what some of these families are going through and what this looked like for them. And if you are a family that has any experience with getting a letter where the district is saying, hey, if you don't come to school, we're going to have to refer you to truancy court, or if you've gotten the letter that says, the constables come to your door and summoned you to truancy court, we want to hear from you. It doesn't have to be anything that's recorded, or if you're not comfortable, but we do want to hear from you so we can get a better idea for our reporting as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for reporting on this, Kelly. I'm sure lots of parents and students out there are thankful of you as well for doing this. And thanks for sharing it here on KXAN Live.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all we have today for KXAN Live Inside the Investigation. We'll be back later on today with more streams, and we hope to see you here. Thank you.